Before a single ball lands in Toronto, before the first practice court fills with the sound of strings meeting felt, before a single match is decided, the question is already alive. What does a player do with the weight of a world that has just discovered her? 6 weeks ago, Alex Eala walked off the grass at Wimbledon, having done something the tennis world had not fully prepared itself to witness. Not from someone her age. Not from that part of the world. Not at that stage of what everyone was still calling a career in its early chapters. And now, before the echoes have even faded, she is walking into the National Bank Open in Toronto, into one of the deepest WTA 1000 fields on the calendar, carrying something far heavier than a racket bag. She is carrying expectations that did not exist 3 months ago. That is a different kind of weight entirely. Here is what nobody talks about when they celebrate a breakthrough. The celebration ends. The moment passes. The headlines cycle toward the next story. But the opponent across the net at the next tournament has read every single one of those headlines. They have watched the footage. They have charted the patterns. They have found the edges. And they are ready. The element that powered the rise, surprise, freedom, nothing to lose, evaporates the moment everyone realizes you can win. From this point forward, Alex Eala plays with a target on her back. And Toronto wasted no time reminding her of that reality. The official draw came out, and the section she landed in was not designed to flatter anyone. She enters as the number 25 seed, a seeding that tells you everything about how far she has climbed while simultaneously telling you nothing about how difficult the road ahead will be. The seed earns a first-round bye. The bye earns rest, preparation, an extra day of watching the tournament reveal itself before she steps into it. But byes are a double-edged gift. They also earn an extra day of thinking, waiting, imagining every possible opponent before a single one of them has been confirmed. Sometimes the match you haven't played is the hardest one of all. When she does step onto the court, the first name waiting across the net is Alicia Parks. Athletic. Explosive. Exactly the kind of opponent who can make a first match feel like a final if you let the occasion get inside your head. Win that match, survive that test, and the tournament opens up, but not into easier territory. Into Noskova. Linda Noskova. A name that already carries its own complicated history with Alex this season. 2 meetings. 2 Noskova victories. Tennis is a sport with a long memory, and every previous encounter becomes invisible scaffolding for the next one. For Noskova, a third match would be an opportunity to extend a streak, to assert dominance over a player the world is suddenly paying close attention to. For Alex, if it happens, it becomes something rarer and more valuable than a seeding or a ranking point. It becomes a chance to rewrite the story. That is what elite athletes actually chase. Not revenge, that word belongs to movies. Growth. The chance to stand in the same moment you previously couldn't handle and handle it differently. The chance to prove that the player who lost those 2 matches no longer exists in quite the same form. But even before that possibility can materialize, the section of the draw tells you something else, something that gives the entire week its particular texture of pressure. Coco Gauff is in the same quarter. Sit with that for a moment. Grand Slam champion. One of the fastest athletes on a tennis court, anywhere in the world, on any surface. A competitor who has not simply learned to handle pressure at the biggest stages, but who genuinely seems to be powered by it. She is precisely the kind of player that forces every rising contender to stop theorizing about their own potential and start proving it. And in the bottom half of the draw, further along the road that Alex would have to travel to reach the final, Elena Rybakina. Power. Composure. Major titles. A playing style built to dismantle confidence, one heavy ball at a time. This draw was not assembled to test whether Alex Eala can play brilliant tennis. It was assembled to test whether she can survive a week of it against players who believe, with complete conviction, that they belong here more than anyone. That is what WTA 1000 events actually are. Not showcase stages. Examinations. And the timing of this one, the specific location it occupies on the calendar, gives it a gravity that extends far beyond the trophy waiting at the end of the week. Because Toronto sits directly in the path of the US Open, the last Grand Slam of the year. The hard-court major that has broken more promising seasons than any injury ever could. Perform in Toronto, and you arrive at Flushing Meadows with belief in your body, sharpness in your game, momentum in every step. Struggle here, And suddenly the questions that felt answered at Wimbledon are completely open again. Was the run on grass a product of the surface? Of opponents who hadn't yet studied her? Of conditions that simply suited her game at that particular moment in time? Or was it a signal? The first real glimpse of a ceiling that is still rising? Toronto is where those questions stop being theoretical. Consider what the surface shift actually demands. Grass is soft. Points are short. Serves decide everything. The margins are almost absurdly narrow. 1 centimeter of trajectory, 1 millisecond of timing, and the entire dynamic of a point reverses. Hard courts are different in almost every way. Rallies extend. Patterns matter more. Footwork under sustained pressure becomes the difference between winning and losing long before the score reflects it. Players who dominated one surface and crumbled on the other have filled the footnotes of professional tennis for decades. The greats learned to travel between worlds. They adapted. They rebuilt their games on different foundations while keeping the core intact. That transition, specifically the speed of that transition, is what separates champions from one tournament stories. This week, Alex Eala begins that argument in earnest. And yet there is something quietly remarkable about the position she now occupies, even amid all that pressure. The seeding. The bye. The way opponents and coaches speak about her when they are asked, carefully, what they think of this young player from the Philippines who has been turning heads all summer. The answer is respect. Not politeness. Not the kind of careful diplomacy athletes use to avoid bulletin board material. Actual respect. The kind that changes preparation schedules. The kind that earns extra hours of video review. The kind that means your name appears on a scouting report not as a footnote but as a headline. There was a time, not long ago, when Alex was still introducing herself to tournaments like this. When every appearance was an audition. When showing up and competing without embarrassment was already a version of success. That time is over. She is not introducing herself to anyone anymore. Everyone already knows who she is. Which means the dynamic of every single match has fundamentally shifted. She can no longer surprise anyone into defeat. She can no longer benefit from opponents who underestimate her game or dismiss her as an interesting story from an underrepresented corner of the sport. The element of surprise, perhaps the most powerful weapon a rising player possesses, has been surrendered in exchange for recognition. What remains is the harder gift, the obligation to be excellent on purpose. Every service game. Every return game. Every tie break. Every moment where the score is close and the crowd is loud and the body wants to tighten, all of it is now expected to produce the quality that surprised everyone when it first appeared. That is an entirely different kind of pressure than the hunger of an unknown player trying to make a name. Hunger is easy to feel. Consistency is hard to build. There is a pattern in professional tennis that repeats itself often enough to carry the weight of a rule. A young player breaks through. The coverage is breathless. The expectations grow. The next tournament arrives, usually on a different surface, usually with a harder draw, and suddenly every commentator who celebrated the breakthrough is watching for evidence that it was real. Sustainable. Repeatable. Not a moment but a method. For most of those young players, that second tournament is where the story gets complicated. The weight of expectation alters decision-making in ways that are almost invisible from the outside. The big swing that came naturally when there was nothing to lose suddenly has a cost attached to it. The freedom that characterized the breakthrough becomes something to protect rather than something to express. And protecting freedom is the fastest way to lose it. The players who survive that transition, who move through it rather than collapsing under it, almost always share one trait. They have learned to play the next point instead of the narrative surrounding it. They compete in the present tense while the entire world tries to drag them into the future. That is the mental skill Toronto will be testing this week. Not just the forehand. Not just the serve. The ability to walk onto a hard court, against a field that has studied every frame of your recent performances, and simply play tennis. Watch the early rounds carefully. The score matters, but it is almost secondary. What matters is the quality of decision-making under pressure. Whether the shot selection reflects confidence or caution. Whether the body language between points tells a story of belief or self-protection. Those are the signals that reveal whether this is a player growing into her potential or one beginning to feel its limits from the inside. Because the matches in Toronto won't only be won and lost by skill. They'll be won and lost by the space between points. By the walk to the baseline. By the way one bad game either becomes fuel or becomes doubt. By whether every tight moment is met with the same competitive instinct that made Wimbledon possible. That's the real story. Not the draw. Not the possible opponents. The story is what Alex Eala carries inside when the moment gets heavy. And here is the other thing about this tournament that nobody should overlook. Something that extends far beyond the individual career of one player. Alex Eala's presence in the seeded section of a WTA 1000 field is not simply a personal achievement. It is a statement about where tennis is expanding. About the geography of the sport beginning to shift in ways the establishment is still catching up to. About a young woman from the Philippines standing in the same draw as the most decorated players on the planet and belonging there completely. Not as a storyline, not as a feel-good narrative, but as a genuine competitive force. The history of professional tennis has been written by a relatively narrow set of nations. That story is changing, slowly, and athletes like Alex are part of the reason why. Every match she wins at this level adds another paragraph to a chapter that is still being written. Every ranking point earned in Toronto or beyond is a signal to every young player in every corner of the world who has been told, quietly or loudly, that tennis isn't for them. So the stakes are never quite as simple as a first-round match in a WTA 1000 draw. They never are, when the player in question carries something larger than herself onto the court. As the tournament unfolds across the coming days, as results start rewriting projections and upsets ripple through the bracket and the field slowly reveals which players arrived ready and which arrived hoping, the section surrounding Alex will become one of the most closely watched in the draw. Some of those potential matches will happen. Some will be erased before they can materialize. Tennis is unpredictable that way. The player everyone expects to face you in the quarterfinal loses in the second round. The opponent you prepared least for is suddenly the one standing across the net. The draw is just a map. The territory is always different. What doesn't change is the opportunity. A strong week in Toronto doesn't simply add points to a ranking. It adds something more durable and more difficult to measure. It adds credibility to the argument that what happened at Wimbledon wasn't the peak. That the peak is somewhere further ahead. That the season isn't winding down, it's building toward something. And if this week goes the other way, if the hard courts prove harder to navigate than expected, if the step up in conditions or competition or expectation proves too steep right now, that tells a different story too. A useful one. Professional tennis is built on the accumulation of information. Every loss is a lesson written in the most expensive possible ink. The players who learn from those losses fastest are the ones who end up defining their era. So either way, Toronto matters. Either way, the next week of tennis is going to tell us something we didn't know before. The tournament is live. The field is assembled. The courts are ready. And somewhere in the city, in a practice block or a quiet hotel room or a pre-match routine that has become familiar across 1,000 different cities, Alex Eala is preparing for what comes next. The question now isn't whether she belongs here. That question was answered already. The question is whether Toronto becomes the place where the summer's momentum becomes the season's foundation, or the place where the tennis world discovers that the next chapter requires something she hasn't yet had to find. Every great career has a moment where the story almost turned the other way. A match that could have ended everything. A tournament where the pressure was too much, too soon. A surface that revealed a gap that took years to close. The players we remember best are the ones who found something in those moments. Not perfection. Not ease. Something rawer than that. Refusal. The refusal to let the story be written by anyone but themselves. Toronto is waiting. The hard courts say nothing. They don't care about Wimbledon. They don't care about headlines or rankings or nations watching from thousands of miles away. They only care about what happens when the pressure arrives and every comfortable idea about potential gives way to the cold arithmetic of the scoreboard. What does Alex Eala do when that moment comes? That is the only question that matters now. And we are about to find out.